This is the Retirement Solution Podcast with financial advisor John Hicks, founder of J. Hagan Capital.
And I'm Heather Branch here with John, asking him for his ideas on ways you can be working now to better prepare for your financial future. RetirementSolutionRadio.com is where you can begin your own conversation with the team at J. Hagan Capital. We also have links posted in the show notes, or again, find us anytime at RetirementSolutionRadio.com. It's tax season.
Boo.
We have to talk about it because it's going to sneak. It's every single year. I don't know why it catches me off guard. It's not like it's a flexing date like Thanksgiving. April 15th comes the same time every year, and here I am, the same thing every year. Oh, March 30th rolls up. I'm like, uh-oh. I guess I better get to work on things.
It is odd how that works out, right? You know, it's this exact same period of time every year, you know, right after the first quarter, you know, in April. And we know that we're going to have to pay our taxes. Or some of us get some money back. I'm never that lucky.
No.
Are you? Do you ever get lucky?
No. I feel like I blame my husband for everything. Ever since I got married, he's come along and I can never...
See, I know.
It never works out. We try and we try every single year. We goal is for zero, and we always mess it up some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, and if you think about it, it's almost absurd, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you know, the government's like, hey, you know, go ahead and tally everything up and tell us what you owe.
Yep.
It's like, well, how do I know that?
Right.
Don't you know that?
Can you help me?
I mean,
Help me.
why don't you tell me what I owe, and then I'll just write a check or whatever I got to do, or maybe go get another job and take out a loan from the bank to pay them for the work that supposedly I did. That I have to pay them for?
Right.
But what kind of a crazy onus is that? It's like, well, how much do you owe? It's like, I don't know. And that's the biggest thing, right?
Yep.
So, you know, it's so interesting. So when people say, oh, you know, I've got a tax guy, well, what they're typically talking about is the person just puts in the numbers that you give them on a form, right?
Yeah.
And I see people, the frustration in their face, that sallow look, their eyes get all sunken in. They're like, John, can you help me with my taxes? I'm like, I have no idea how to put that stuff in their system. Now, what I do know how to do is plan and strategize to pay less money.
Right.
But I have no idea how to do this. It is complicated.
It's so complicated. And you know what? The world is against us because all we want to do, like you were saying, it's like we just want to we're honest, hardworking citizens. We want to do what's right every time.
Sure.
And not only is the IRS not telling us, not helping us out, but now you got scammers at your back. And here's the thing. Scammers have gotten good. Like the emails that are out there and the websites they built, they look legit.
I know. It's crazy. So I had a client that called me and they said, John, I got an email from the IRS.
Yep.
I'm like, well, all right. So that's a scam because the IRS doesn't send emails. The IRS also will not send you a text.
Yep.
They will not call you on the phone. So the two things that'll happen, they send you correspondence in the mail, or they show up at your doorstep.
Okay. Never respond to a text or an email. Got it. Yep.
Right. So, but the craziest thing is they forward me this email.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this thing. It looked legitimate. And, you know, typically you know how to click on whoever sent you stuff and you can see that spam, whatever.
Yeah.
No. It said irs.gov, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, how on earth did they make that happen?
Good.
It was decent. And if I did not know for a fact that the IRS does not communicate that way, I think I would have been taken by it.
You could have, you a person in this field, could have fallen
absolutely.
to it.
And of course, you know, it didn't sound like it was crazy. It was just like, hey, we're verifying some information. Please send us, you know, these numbers from last year's tax return. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. And of course, what was it? Socials, birthdays, all that stuff that they're trying to scam for. And of course, your PIN, you know, whatever that PIN is, usually when you file your return, if they have that, they can actually
have everything.
Yeah. Well, they can actually have money that you may be owed go to their bank account.
Yep.
See, that's the main thing. If you don't have that PIN, then it's one thing. But if you could actually if they scam you, they could potentially get your refund check in their bank account.
Speaking of refund check, the latest scheme that involves IRS impersonators texting or emailing, they're asking you to click a link to check the status of your refund. So that's where it also gets tricky. Like you've already, if you are a planner, a think-aheader, and you have already submitted your tax returns for 2023, be very, very wary of emails and or texts that come through talking about the status of your refund because it is very often a phish, PHISH, a phish campaign. Again, from scammers. And again, as John was saying, the real IRS is never going to contact you by text or email.
Right.
It's just one more reminder of the things that are working against us, but also thinking about the way the IRS, the things that they don't do. They don't give us tax advice like we were just talking about. Here's what's interesting. We, again, hardworking, honest people, we're seeking advice. And a lot of people have financial advisors in their lives, John, that also will not give us tax advice.
Yeah, and most of the time, it's just because they're not allowed to.
Right.
I mean, if you look at one of the big box, brokerage firms, take your pick, and one of the big guys, they often don't do tax advice because they don't want the liability, because they know that advisor often is not skilled and trained in a lot of parts of the tax code.
Right.
And so big, Merrill Lynch or UBS or Morgan Stanley, they don't want that onus on them, right? They don't want the IRS saying, "Ooh, you gave tax advice to this client. It's wrong. You're going to have to pay their penalties and interest and fees." But the problem is it hurts the client. The client needs to know some of these things, right?
Right.
But the advisor often, because of their employer, is not even allowed to do it, even if they know the information. So that's why I typically tell folks, hey, well, work with an advisor who does know about the tax code.
Yeah.
But then also it's even better if they have CPAs and tax attorneys on staff, just like our firm.
Yep.
We specifically have CPAs and tax attorneys on our staff because there are so many complications with things. There are so many things if you're going to relocate to another state, or if you want to buy investment property, if you want to sell investment property, or if you want to move into your lake home and then sell your primary residence. Believe it or not, those are all different tax complications.
Yep.
They're not difficult to deal with, but I mean, I rely on my tax attorney almost once a week from some junk that I got to fill out because I have investment properties and all these things. I'm like, hey, can I write that off? He's like, no. I was like, okay, well, can I do this? He's like, no. I was like, well, can you give me a yes to something? Yes, if you give me something that we can actually write off. I was like, okay, fine. But anyway, but it's one of those crazy things. So what I always say to everyone is, the better you've done. What is the phrase? I think Jay-Z even had a song, "Mo money, mo problems."
No, that
It may not be Jay-Z, but it was someone.
No, that was Biggie Smalls, wasn't it?
Okay, Biggie. Yeah, Biggie problems. Yeah. But it is so very true. So the better we do, often we probably want to run some of these concepts by someone that's skilled at this part of the tax code, right? Because it's a very different thing to have a CPA that's just filling out the information you gave them, as opposed to them actually planning around how do you avoid that tax next year, or how do you eliminate that tax by doing certain structural or procedural things that can eliminate that tax in the future, right? So those are very important. Those are planning ideas. Those are not preparation ideas.
Okay.
There's a huge difference between planning and filing a tax return, right? If we do things correctly, we are planning right now for next year's taxes, which is the big deal. We're really not looking at last year's. That's kind of already happened.
Okay.
There's only a handful of things that you can do to pay less taxes for last year. That's already happened.
Okay.
We need to do stuff this year for this year, which we're going to file April of next year in 2025, right? And people they get lost. They wait to the end of the year. And then, of course, if you're a really good CPA and a really good tax attorney, you are very busy in September, October, November, and December.
Yeah.
So that's what I tell everyone. Hey, just do it now. Get it over with. Quit procrastinating. Believe me, there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars the average bear can keep in their pockets if they just have good tax advice, right? So just don't expect you're going to get it from your advisor unless that's something they do. In our firm, we do that because I see the value. I see the value to our clients if we can plan correctly. Because again, guys, tens of thousands of dollars belong to you if we just understand the actual tax code, which is what we need to do.
And does it not apply so much more also for our retirement years? Because I think about my husband and myself, for example, we have one job, one employer. We each get our 1099 each year.
Or your W-2s.
Or my W-2s, thank you.
W-2 with an employer, of course.
We each get our W-2s every year. So we have a very uncomplicated situation. But when somebody like us, for example, we get into retirement and suddenly we have to think about things like withdrawals from our 401ks, dividend paying stocks, Social Security income. Now we've got all these different income sources, hopefully, if we plan correctly. Right? So doesn't our tax position and finally everything about it becomes much more complicated for people like, for example, me and Kyle, where it was very uncomplicated for a lot of our working years? Is that not also true?
Well, the craziest thing is that once we get to the point where we're thinking about retirement, there are fewer places to hide. right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like trying to hide yourself in a really small sandbox.
Yeah.
There's not enough sand to cover you up. It's not deep enough to do it.
Okay.
And so because of that, it makes it very difficult. Now, there are all kinds of things that we can do when we get to those retirement years or to plan right before we retire to know how do we get money out of those accounts where the government's going to tax us every stinking year for the rest of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
How can we move some of those dollars by being smart and use strategies to move those dollars to tax-free accounts? So Heather, I was meeting with a couple this past week, and they happen to be 59 years old. So they're not going to retire yet. They're going to wait a few years so they can turn on Social Security and things like that. But they saved about $1.3 million in their IRAs.
Yeah.
And they're like, John, I'm going to work for a few more years. Should I make conversions now while I'm still working because we're going to higher tax bracket, or should we wait? Well, we just simply ran the math. We looked at, okay, what if they maxed out the 24% tax bracket? What would it look like? So Heather, when I ran through it, if they retired at age 63, they're 59 now, with 1.3 million in those accounts. If they did it exactly like they're currently doing and made no plans, they would potentially pay about $2.4 million over the course of their lifetime in taxes on that $1.3 million account.
That's more than they'd saved.
Literally. And this is just assuming they make about 7% on the money over time. They were in good investments. There's no reason to think if the markets are helpful that they couldn't get 7% on their money.
Right.
But them earning 7% on $1.3 million over the course of their lifetime, assuming they live to be 90 years old, both of them, they would pay $2.4 million in taxes. Now, by letting them understand, hey, now we have a choice. We can decide to implement some other strategies to pay less taxes. And in doing so, it would have reduced their tax bill from $2.4 million is the expectation down to $404,000. $404,000 instead of $2.4 million. Heather, I don't think I have to have any bells and whistles going off to let everyone know that will potentially save these clients $2 million of their own money.
Not just save them their money, it's going to change their lives.
Completely, absolutely. And of course, what happens if you get it in some of these proper vehicles like Roth IRAs, some tax-advantaged insurance alternatives, some things like that. There are very attractive things. They can still grow the money. They can put it in whatever they want to invest in. They can invest it in real estate. They can invest it in lake houses. They can do whatever they want, but that's a $2 million savings. Wow. Literally, that's money they would have given to the government had they not actually looked at, hey, is there a better way to do it? Well, guys, there is. There is. And believe it or not, it did actually make sense to start converting money now, even while they're still working, as opposed to waiting for 3 or 4 years. No, that's not always the case. It isn't always the case at all. Okay. So that's why you have to do the math. You have to actually see, hey, if I'm going to be making these changes now, is that going to jump me to the next higher tax bracket? If it will, that doesn't mean you don't do it. It just means you really have to understand the math. And if it won't increase your taxes, then my goodness, this is the lowest tax environment we're probably going to be in over the course of our lives. The government is broker and broker and broker every single day. We still are spending all this money we don't have, right? And so I think that the government's going to have to require more. If we pay less taxes today, we're going to be better off for the rest of our retirement future.
And if you are ready to begin your own conversation with John and his team about getting to work on these things within your retirement savings plan, you can begin that conversation right now. Visit us at retirementsolutionradio.com, or we also have links posted in the show notes, so you can just click there and it will direct you to our website, which is, again, retirementsolutionradio.com.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Solution Podcast with John Hicks. Begin the conversation about your savings plan with John and the team at J. Hagan Capital by visiting retirementsolutionradio.com. Be sure to listen to John's radio show, The Retirement Solution, Saturdays at 8 a.m. and Sundays at 9 a.m. on News Radio 840 WHAS.
J. Hagan Capital Inc. is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if J. Hagan Capital Inc. is licensed in your state, please call 502-690-5635. J. Hagan Capital Inc. is not affiliated with nor endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency. It does not provide legal or tax advice. Annuity guarantees rely solely on the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance and annuity products offered through Jonathan Hicks, insurance license number 548962.